Welcome to this week's sermon recap. I'm Pastor Gary from Faith Baptist Church. Sunday I spoke from Joshua chapter 7 about the drama of sin, specifically about Achan. And I drew three conclusions. Number one, there's no secret sin. God knows everything. It's revealed before him, even before we sin, our thoughts and intents of the heart. Secondly, we can only be perfect through Jesus Christ. We could see the nation of Israel was held accountable for the sin of one person. It shows us that God wants perfection, and the only way to achieve that is through Jesus. And thirdly, we learned that we cannot win the battle if there's sin in our lives, specifically the spiritual battle. There will always be that barrier, there will always be that hindrance, and how we need to come clean with God, because in a way, we're already clean with God. He knows. Why do we hide? Now, I wanted to add James chapter 1, well-known verse, and read these passages as a little bit of extra. Didn't have time Sunday. I preached long enough. Verse 13 from James chapter 1 says this: "Blessed is the man who endures temptation, for when he has been approved," notice what it says, "he will receive the crown of life which the Lord promises to those that love him." Here we get a little bit of a key of understanding of how to overcome temptation. We love Jesus because we love Jesus more. We love God more. We don't want to displease God. So when temptation comes, it gives us that motivation, that incentive, that drive to overcome temptation. Notice the highest motivation is love, not fear, but love. And as we grow in our relationship with God, sometimes it starts with fear, but for us to grow into an intimate relationship with God, we begin to do these things out of love. Now, verse 13, "Let no one say when he is tempted, I am tempted by God." That's kind of shirking the responsibility. Well, it wasn't my fault, and they did, or this happened, or whatever happened, we want to blame God. "For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he himself tempt anyone." But verse 14 gives us the key. "But each one is tempted when he is drawn away by" what? "His own desires and enticed." And this is where we need God. This is where we need God's help. That's why we can't be perfect without Jesus, because those temptations come from within. And by the way, all of us face these temptations. And when we look at last week's sermon, I hope we didn't hear that sermon or listen to that sermon and think about other people. I was not thinking about anybody but myself. What am I doing that's hindering the work of God? What am I doing that's hindering the church? What can I do better in my life? What do I need to confess? And everyone's drawn away by his own desire. And notice what he says. After he's enticed, then when desire has conceived, it gives birth to what? Sin. Desire, we talked about Achan, right? He said, I saw, I coveted, I desire, I took, and then I hid. I added a fourth step because I traditionally would talk about the three steps, but there's actually a fourth. He hid. So he saw, he coveted or desired, he took, and then he hid. If he would have changed four into I confessed, before they went into the battle of Ai, if he would have confessed and brought that to Joshua, things would have been different. But he hid, and that's the problem with sin. We hid. I don't know what it is that Satan's tactic is for us to be justified in our minds, just like we saw back here. He said, let no man say he's tempted of God. It's God's fault or somebody else's fault. So it gives birth to sin, and sin. Now here is the thing that really needs to motivate us. When it is, notice what he says, full grown, brings forth death. You see, that temptation comes, we give into it, sin is born, but sin doesn't leave us. Sin has consequences. And it did for Achan. It did for his family. It did for his relatives. It did for the nation of Israel. It did for Joshua. You see, sin has consequences. Sin is destructive. And so when sin is full grown, it brings forth death. It always does. Joshua 7 was a great example of that. Sin brings forth death. That's why we need to stop it at stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. If we get to stage 3, instead of hiding, we need to confess. Well, looking forward to seeing you tonight at our Wednesday night programs, and then Sunday at 10:30, and also Saturday 10:30. If anybody wants to come out and help us assemble the nativity scene. God bless and have a great week.